thank you to everyone for joining today. What we're looking to cover today are the SGS issues. So SGS obviously being the contractor that Ofgem employ to audit the letter of direction directed sites on the GDN's networks to ensure compliance with the thermal energy regs. So this has been a topic at the entry forum for a number of months now, where we've started to share numbers of SGS issues and trying to focus on the particular repeating topics that SGN raise directly with the GDNs. And then we need to subsequently further explore with the biomethane entry operators. So I don't know if you can just flick to the aims slide, Katie. Thank you. So basically, the aims of today are just to increase the awareness of DFO requirements under the letter of direction, which I think Catherine's going to go through later on. And ultimately, we're looking to reduce the volume of SGS issues which are raised, which are largely infringements of the letter of direction or general inquiries around the operation of the site. Obviously, reducing the volume of loss of record incidents is a primary focus as well, because a lot of these SGS issues result in the GDNs raising a loss of record incident with National Grid, which ultimately reduces the CV of, or can lead to reduction of the CV for the whole LDZ. Also, loss of record incidents within the D+5 window can result in increases in National Grid CV shrinkage, which is ultimately paid for by gas shippers who operate on the transmission system, and then that flows through to ultimately to customers. Obviously, there's a quite a high resource allocation requirement for both GDNs and biomethane operators to resolve these Ofgem SGS issues. Sometimes these issues can take many months to resolve, especially where excuse me, where there've been a lack of logbook entries, for example, at the site to explain exactly what was happening on that particular day that caused the issue. And ultimately, we're looking to improve the accuracy of overall gas energy measurement and metering, which again is making the whole process more efficient for everyone. So they're the general aims of today. So I don't know if anyone's got any particular comments on those aims before we kind of move on and start to cover the various areas. Okay, I shall plow on. So this is just a standard GDN overview of SGS issues which have been raised in 2020, and then we started to compile the kind of numbers from the beginning of this year to give regular updates at the DN entry forum. So we've broken it down into various categories on the left. As you can see, there's cylinder changes which encompass the calibration bottles and test gas bottles, logbook entry issues, letter of approval deviations, obviously letter of approval for the specific instruments, post-commissioning issues, and just general other issues. And we're trying to provide these numbers at each DN entry forum just to give a track, to give some transparency around whether we're starting to reduce the overall numbers, or it also allows us just to focus on particular areas where there might be issues. For example, the cylinder change issues. We provided a cylinder change procedure recently, which I believe, Katie, now is on the ENA website and has been circulated to all DFOs. I think also GDNs have separately issued that particular procedure to DFOs. Okay, if we can just move on to the next slide, Katie, please. Thanks, Katie. So here we've got some examples of SGS issues. So obviously SGS attend the biomethane sites on a regular basis, and will scrutinize instruments and logbooks, and identify any particular deviations from the letter of approval or letter of direction. We have a specific portal with SGS where we log on to the portal to kind of scrutinize these SGS issues, and we communicate through this portal in terms of our responses to the particular issues. Often, if not always, we have to communicate directly with the DFOs to clarify particular points, to kind of assemble a response directly to SGS. So here you can see the kind of detail. I won't read all of these particular issues, but I guess this slide pack, Katie, can be made available after the session today. But this just gives you some sort of detail around the level of detail that SGS will go into in terms of the various issues. So you can see there are calibration gas cylinder issues where certificates or the details haven't been updated into the relevant systems. Logbooks not being fully completed to provide kind of a wider information around what particular issue was occurring on that day, or calibration setups not in line with letter of approval, etc. So that just gives a general kind of flavor of these issues, and a lot of them are repeated, at specific sites on a regular basis. We do, and I know all GDNs do this, but we do have regular sessions directly with DFOs. SGN certainly carries out an annual review with each site where these issues are generally discussed, but we obviously go. We speak to DFOs on these specific points and attempt to resolve them. And it does take up a significant resource for us, and certainly for other GDNs as well. And it also ties people up at the DFO end to resolve them. Okay, I think we can probably move on to the next slide, Katie. I think this possibly is this your bit, Catherine?
I think so. Good morning, all. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Catherine Litster. I'm the Gas Quality Manager for Wales and West Utilities. I'm just going to quickly run through where the audit actions come from. As Joel mentioned, the gas examiner who works for SGS visits each site once a quarter, and they do lots of checks to ensure compliance with all the different aspects of regulations and things. So they'll carry out checks on all the equipment, any documentation, including logs, all the data from the computer systems, looking at different alarms and inactivity within the system. If any of these fail or he finds a problem with anything on your site, then you'll be issued an inspection problem with out of one of these. So it'll either be a Gas Act breach, which is part of the Gas Act, a regulation breach, which is a breach of the thermal energy regulations, direction non-compliance, which is obviously non-compliance with the letter of direction, letter of approval non-compliance, Ofgem letters of approval non-compliance, or an observation, which is not a breach or non-compliance, but it's something that's observed and not correct and should be put right before the next visit. Next slide, please, Katie. Okay, so I've lumped these two together, the Gas Act and the calculation of thermal energy regulations, because the Gas Act is the umbrella act, which encompasses everything that comes underneath it. I didn't want to repeat myself twice because the different things are in there. So just mainly focusing on the calculation of thermal energy regs, which focuses on how the daily calorific value, or the CV, is calculated for each offtake or biomethane site, and how that is then calculated as a flow-weighted average CV for the LDZ. Focusing on each site, it sets out how the CV should be calculated, the actual calculation for working out the calorific value, what we should do if there are any failures of collecting the CV any day, or if we put in a loss of record, the types of equipment that we can use on site. So these are Ofgem approved equipment, and we can't use anything but equipment that's been approved for use. How the premises should be set out. So the gas examiner has rights to ensure that he has a comfy chair, and he's got a table to work at, that it's heated and there's lighting. And access to the site is maintained. And then it sets out what the penalties should be if any of these should fail. If you can, so these are regulations, they are in law, and the penalties are quite steep if it's deemed necessary that it needs that. Next slide, please, Katie. Okay, so the Ofgem letter of direction. These are given to us from Ofgem. We have to apply for them for each site. Obviously, as a producer, you're not allowed to hold these letters of direction. The DN hold these on your behalf. This sets out the place the CV will be measured. So this is the actual sample point on your site that Ofgem stipulate that the gas that goes into a chromatograph or whatever the CV determination device is coming from, and it cannot come from a different place than that. The time the CV be measured, so this is the start of the gas day, which is 5 a.m. and it cannot, unless there's a fault or maintenance, it will not start at any other time. The apparatus and equipment that must be used, so this is Ofgem authorized equipment that's been through all the checks and compliance to what we need it to do to calculate the CV correctly, and the manner the CV will be calculated. And this is just using the flow weighted average calculation, or if we can't use that, what we can use otherwise, whether it be the lowest value for the last 12 months or the lowest value of 37 that can be used. It also states that your gas CV determination device shall be used all the time. So you cannot switch it off for any reason unless there is a fault with it or maintenance. There should always be a flow going through your device. Next one, please, Katie.
I think it's probably worth saying there, Catherine, isn't it, that
Yeah,
the issue there where the CV drops to either 37 or the lowest CV over the last 12 months, that's what can trigger this this CV shrinkage issue within the
yes,
kind of D+5 window, which can result in considerable costs associated with CV shrinkage for national grid transmission and shippers. Yeah.
yeah, especially the 37.
Indeed. Yeah.
If your site hasn't been running for over a year, then you'll have to use that 37 anyway, and that's when a lot of the CV shrinkage problems pop up. Okay, so the Ofgem letters of approval. So each piece of equipment that's approved for use from Ofgem on the site will have its own letter of approval. So these are the CV determination devices, like the Emerson chromatographs, the gas PTOs, and then the software that's used on site. So particularly DANIT. So your NCAL Go, the DAM Go, all those pieces of software are often approved and will do exactly what Ofgem want it to do with the information that's collected. So the letter of direction, letter of approval, they stipulate how the CV determination devices are to be set up and operated. So there is a particular setup that's in the letter that it must be set to. It also states about site logs and how they should be kept and what needs to be in the site logs. It details the types of calibration gas that should be used and the exact constituents of that calibration gas, and the same for the official Ofgem test gas. So it needs to be exactly as stated within the allowances in that letter of approval. Next one, please. Okay, so once we have all this information, each site should have its own copy of their letters of approval and letter of direction if they want to read it, to understand what they need to do, and these can be supplied from the DN if they want them to. A lot of the audit actions that we're seeing are around site logs. I'd say around 75% are logs that haven't been completed. As logs aren't completed, you can't understand what was happening on that day. In the letter of approval, the directed sites are obligated to keep logs on site for its inspection by the gas examiner. And these must contain all maintenance that is carried out on the flow rate average system. So instrumentation, support devices, the chromatographs, the software on site, all the equipment for that. Anytime that the flow stops past the sample point, so if you switch off your chromatograph for maintenance or there's a fault on it and you're not using any gas in the sample stream, this must be written down at the exact time it stopped and when it started again. Any testing that you're doing on site, so your ME2 tests, for example, they should be written down, and what test you'll be doing each day, so the gas examiner, when they look at your log, can understand that you were doing a temperature test at that time on that day, and that's the reason why there's an alarm in the system. So any faults on the analyzer need to be written down with the times it was in fault and the reason for that fault and what was done to correct that fault. And then anything else, if you're not sure, my suggestion would be write it down. If you're working on site and you don't know if it needs to go in a log, write it down anyway. The gas examiner will go past it if he doesn't need to know about it. If by doing these logs, we can cut a lot of the audit actions down. If you can take out details of maintenances that were carried out, then there wouldn't be an audit action to start with. Any questions on the site logs? No. Next slide, please, Katie. Okay, these next two, I've got 2 slides for calibration gas and for the test gas. And these are the next main culprits of audit actions. So the calibration gas is obviously used to calibrate the CV determination device every day. And the type of the gas mixture to be used and the setup of how it is in the DANINT and the controller is stated in that letter of approval. If you need to know what that is, then we can supply you with a letter of approval for your device. So if you go to site and change that calibration gas, then the reference calibration from the certificate must be entered into the controller. This is done before the first time the bottle is used. If you don't update the calibration details and ensure they're correct, the next day you go to use that bottle, it will be unusable, and that will be a loss of record, and then that could cause the CV shrinkage in the future. A few other details is the cylinder must be kept at the correct temperature. It can't drop below 10 degrees. It must not be used after the low pressure limit. In most cases, it's 4 bar. And it must not be used after its expiration date. Any questions about calibration gas?
I think it's probably worth saying as well, Catherine, that the both the calibration gas, test gas certificate details need to be, certainly for SGN anyway, and I suspect it's the same for all GDNs, need to be provided to us because we update them.
That's coming later.
Oh, is that coming later? Sorry, I've jumped the gun.
That's
Sorry,
correct.
apologies. Okay.
No worries. Oh, Steve's got his hand up.
Yeah, sorry to go back. You said towards the beginning about this shrinkage, this 37 player. If your plant is not operated for a year, what did you mean by that? Sorry.
So if you say that you commissioned today and you haven't got a year's worth of records to go back to for your lowest CV in the last year, then you'll be, if you had a loss of record on site, it will immediately drop to using a CV of 37. That's only in the case of a loss of record.
A loss of record from SCADA or?
So for if your CV determination device fails to produce a valid CV in the gas day, so it's not working whilst you've been flowing, or if the calibration details aren't correct, you haven't had a valid 35-day test in the last 35 days, that will create a loss of record. That loss of record means that your CV can't be used in the flow weighted average calculation, but something else has to go in there instead. It can't be left blank. So our main attribution would be that we'd use the lowest CV in the last year for your site. If your site hasn't been running for an entire year, then it will drop to a fallback value of 37 instead.
And that's as detailed in thermal energy regs.
Detailed in the thermal energy regs. Yeah.
Fairly sure we would trip. We would stop.
I would hope you would. Yeah, your system should be set up that if any problems, that you would go to your divert valve or the ROV would close to prevent any gas
That's okay.
flowing.
Thanks.
But then again, if you don't change the calibration gas correctly,
Yes.
then you just still end up with a loss of record.
Yes. Yes, I
Is
understand that.
Any deviation from the letter of approval, basically, that
Ooh.
SGS determine should result in a loss of record, then they'll require that to be raised. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, is that clear? Okay, so next slide. Okay, so the official off-gem test gas, this is much the same as the calibration gas, but this is used to validate the calibration of your CV determination device at least once within 35 days. You can do it more often, but it needs to happen once within 35 days. It should automatically carry this out. It should be set in your system to complete on the 2nd of each month at a time that doesn't interfere with the daily calibration run or the start and end of the gas day. It's the same as the calibration gas. The reference composition from the certificate must be entered into the Danint software before the first time the bottle is used, for the same reason as the calibration gas, that if it's not in there correctly and it's run, then this won't be valid. The difference with this is that if you did this for 1 day, then everything for the 35 days prior to this will also be a loss of record. So this won't be just 1 day loss of record at a time. If you don't have a valid composition and run a valid 35-day test, then you will invalidate everything to the last 35-day test that was run. So it could be possible that we have a 35-day loss of record. And the same as then the calibration gas, that it must be kept at the correct temperature. You don't use below the low pressure limit, and especially for the test gas, it must be not used after the expiration date. For the test gas, it's 5 years. Because it's not used very regularly, the chances are that this will go out of date before you run out of gas. So you must keep an eye on the date that it expires and change it prior to that, so that we don't cause loss of records. Anyone got any questions on that one? Nope. Next slide, please, Katie. Okay, just a couple on the gas PTO. Obviously, the gas PTO doesn't run a calibration gas, so we're using the 35-day test gas, and it'll be run as agreed with your DN, whatever schedule that would be, whether that be daily, weekly, or monthly. And the other stipulation from Ofgem at the moment is that every 6 months you will need to do a 4-gas test, which is the equivalent of the ISO 10723, and these need to be put in a report and sent to your DN to be forwarded on to Ofgem at the 6-monthly intervals. Next one, please. Okay, there's a few other stipulations. These don't tend to cause too many Ofgem audit actions, but I thought they were worth mentioning. So there's no, please don't do any changes in the Danint software or your controller software without prior agreement from either your DN or from Ofgem. Ensure that all the Danint daily files that are created with all your end of day values are with your DN within the agreed time frame. I think quite a lot of sites are set up with automatic collection, But if this fails, then these need to be picked up manually and emailed or sent to your DN so that we can get them. This will, if we can check these files before any problems can occur, we can sort out any issues that might turn into especially with the 35-day test, because we run them on the first of the second of each month. It gives us about a 4 or 5 day window where we can get a 35-day test ran before it goes out of the time frame. Please inform your DN of any maintenance or faults with any of the equipment on the site immediately, and don't break the Ofgem seals on the sample points or any bypass without prior agreement from us and from Ofgem. Next one, please. Okay, I thought I'd just drop this one in about penalties, because these don't happen very regularly. I've never known one, but you have to remember that the Gas Act and the thermal energy regulations are law, and because of that, there is a steep penalty should Ofgem wish to take it that far. So if you're not acting as you should and the information they deem to be sufficiently bad enough, then there is a fine, and it's of level 5, which is unlimited. So it's just something to be wary about, that there can be penalties for not acting as you should and following the regulations. I think that's the end of my slides for a minute.
Cheers, Catherine. Yeah, this is just a brief slide on the resolution process, which is it's fairly kind of simplified really here, but it just gives a level of insight really into the backwards and forwards process between the GDN and the DFO to resolve these queries. Often there are several communications to and fro to resolve issues, and especially issues which are of a protracted nature, where logbooks, for example, haven't been filled in, and it's very difficult often to resolve queries with the DFO and SGS, and as a result, often loss of records have to be raised because there's no, certainly in my experience, it's very difficult to resolve or gather sufficient information to provide to SGS to give them a robust response. So that's the kind of circle of communications that often result, and it often goes back to back to Elster, Orbital, Tyson's, etc. For support in that. So it does bring in other parties as well into that process. So it can be quite a protracted process. Yeah. I think that's probably it on that one, Katie.
Okay, this is back to me again. So we've been working with all the DNs. I've been working with the ENA to put some procedures together to help you with guidance for how to follow the regulations put in place. And at the moment we've got 2 out, almost 3. So we've been looking at the calibration and test gas exchange, guidance on spot sampling, and what to do for missing daily files. And I'm sure there will be quite a few more to come. So we'll just have a quick look into these. So the calibration and test gas exchange. So we put a procedure in place to look at the exact procedure of how we would expect the calibration bottle and test gas bottle to be replaced. I'm hoping that each site will have their own procedure on how to actually exchange the bottle itself. It's what to do with that once you've exchanged the bottle. So what the checks are that you need to carry out to ensure that the bottle has been exchanged correctly, the need to complete site logs, and that you're expected to inform your DN that the bottle has been replaced with the cylinder number, expiry date, and the composition or a copy of the certificate for that bottle. And that's for both the calibration and the test gas. It's available on the ENA website for anyone who wants to have a look at it. I'd recommend it, it's very good. Next one is the guidance on spot sampling. This one's still in draft, I think. But this sets out the spot samples that are set out by your DN will agree with you a time frame for spot samples, whether that be monthly, 3 monthly, 6 monthly. The levels in the center column are the limits that you're allowed within the gas safety management regulations, and the column on the right is the limits where we would expect you to investigate why the levels are so close to the levels in GSMR. So we won't, if they go over, then we want an inspection to be carried out, or of whether they're getting close, so we can stop them going over. We don't want them to be a breach. The next one. Okay, so as I mentioned, that if we can get the daily files in from yourselves as quickly as possible, if, for instance, if any automatic collection is not happening, then we can make sure that we don't get any audit actions fairly quickly. This one's in draft at the moment, this procedure, and it should be coming out fairly soon. So each of the daily files that are created by Dalint have a specific reason, and those then we want to pick up in the column on the right as quickly as possible. So we're giving the D+2 for a lot of the files. The most important ones that we have are the 35-day test at the bottom, which are X10 files. We'd like these in on the day that they're created, so the 2nd of each month. If they haven't been automatically sent to us, we want them that day so we can check them and make sure everything's correct, so that we don't cause that 35-day or more loss of record and cause any energy shrinkage. Any questions on those? Nope. Next one. Any questions?
I've just got a comment more than a question, Catherine. It's just a bit flippant.
Yeah.
Took me ages to work out what PTO is. It's, in my parlance, it's on a tractor, a power takeoff. So I had to Google it.
Oh, what, the gas PTO?
Yeah, ban all TLAs, I say.
Oh, sorry, that's the name of the equipment. It's called a gas PTO, so I can't call it anything else. I don't even know what the PTO stands for.
Well, I Googled it and it said plant and terminal operations. I don't know if that's correct, but...
No,
No?
the gas PTO is the orbital calorific value determination device that it uses inferred means to come up with a CV for the gas sample that's going through it. The actual piece of equipment is called a gas PTO.
Right, okay.
I don't know. I don't know what the PTO bit stands for, but that's what it's called.
Shouldn't use it then. Right. Okay.
I say that piece of equipment's had many names. That's what it's called at the moment. Anyone got any questions then?
Hi, it's Charlie Thompson from AB Agri. Sorry, I missed part of that presentation in the middle, but do you have procedures for calibration bottle changes, off-gem gas test bottle changes that are quite simple that we can sort of feed out to our teams on site?
So we put together one on the ENA website about what to do with the bottle once it's been changed. So we'd expect each site to have their own procedure for changing the cylinder itself. But once it's been exchanged, then we have a procedure of how to set up the software correctly and what we should do with the information to get it to your DN so we can ensure it's been set up correctly. I'm sure if you'd like a procedure for changing the actual cylinder, your DN would be able to help you with that one.
I think certainly as well, GDNs have provided this procedure direct to biomethane operators. Certainly SGN suggested that it was laminated and stuck on the wall next to the cylinders themselves. I think it's the same for other GDNs as well. But I think I don't know, Katie, maybe you can share the link to the document on the ENA website after the call. That might help, if that helps. Yeah.
I will do, Joel. I'll share around the links to the procedures that we've got along with the recording and the presentation.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, sounds like we haven't got any more questions then.
I think I would just say that it's probably worth certainly GDNs. You can approach GDNs direct as well. If there's any specific points, and we just encourage operators to communicate with GDNs if there's any uncertainties around anything that we've gone through today. Happy to to help in any way we can. Yeah.
Yep, definitely. If you're not sure, just ask, please.
Okay, Katie. I think if there's no more questions, then I think we're probably at the end.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Then I'll get the recording and the slides and links round for the procedures. And thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.